And welcome to another 60 minutes of unscripted .NET discussion. We are the doctors of .NET. We prescribe healthy, predictable .NET guidance in an unpredictable year. I'm your host, Scott Addy, with co-hosts Myra Wenzel and David Pine. I'd like to welcome today's guest, Shahed Chowdhury. Shahed, can you please introduce yourself to the audience? Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hey all, my name is Shahed Chowdhuri. So I work for Microsoft. That's coming up on my 7-year anniversary very soon. So I've had a couple of different roles while at Microsoft. Started off as a tech evangelist, advocating for .NET and other technologies, all things Azure, for several years. And currently I work as a software engineer on the commercial software engineering team and working with enterprise customers to get their stuff in Azure.
Thank you again, Shahed, for joining us on today's show. Why don't we just roll right into the checkup doc, because I know Shahed has a ton of material to share with us today, and I really want to get things rolling. All right, so for today's checkup doc, the scenario here is, let's say you've built a bot, a chat bot, for example, with the Microsoft Bot Framework SDK. And let's say that bot uses speech, understands natural language, handles Q&A, and so on. Well, so here is a doc that will explain how to deploy that particular bot that we described to Azure and then test it from the Azure portal. And the instructions you're going to see here are actually based on the Azure CLI. Therefore, that is a prereq for this tutorial that I'm sharing here. The basic steps, or the overall steps here, include creating the application registration in Azure, which will allow you to authenticate users and interact with the bot via web chat. Another step that follows that is actually creating the bot application service with an ARM template. And the instructions are provided for deploying either to a new resource group or an existing resource group when creating that application service. Other things you'll notice in here are how to prepare your code for that deployment. And this doc will use the azbot prepare deploy command. So again, the Azure CLI, which will add the appropriate scripts and config files for publishing with the az web app deployment command. Finally, you will deploy your code with that az web app deployment command, and then test that bot in the Azure portal using the web chat that we mentioned earlier. Now, it's my understanding, and this is one of the reasons we chose this doc for today's show, it's my understanding that Shahed has actually created a Marvel-inspired bot using the bot framework. So let's dig into that in the hallway track. Let's roll with that.
All right.
All right, so I dropped that teaser out there for the hallway track discussion, but that's not all we're going to talk about today. So Shahed, why don't you kick things off for us and just talk about, some interesting things you're doing, what you want to talk about in today's show. I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Let me know when you're able to see my screen.
It's there now.
All right. Good. So you mentioned a chatbot. So this Marvel-inspired bot is as simple as it looks. All it says is, "I am GRUUT." But the purpose of this chatbot is to be able to show the flexibility and the ease of which you can create a chatbot and deploy it quickly to Azure, and also set up a web chat as well. And by getting some feedback from the community and also some updates, David Pine, yourself, you had contributed as well to update some of the C# code. And Dave Brock, who was one of your guests last week, had also contributed sentiment analysis using Azure Sentiment Analysis to figure out how a GRUUT chatbot should react. Now, as you can see, so that I don't get sued by Marvel, I have spelled GRUUT in a slightly different way. But let's take a look at what the live code does. So this is a deployed version on Azure Web Apps, GRUUT.azurewebsites.net. So again, Azure provides free app services for a certain number of websites. I believe it might be at 10 right now, where you can get a lot of stuff for your free tier. And I'm able to deploy this. And as you can see, I have the web chat over here. And it says type your message. If I typed in something as simple as hi. The group chatbot says, I am Groot. And I can say things like hello, and it's still a little confused because that's all it can say. But if I say something like, what the heck? Let's see how it reacts. And it gets a little angry and starts screaming at you. So again, a little sentiment and last is baked in. It's as simple as it looks, but very powerful to be able to respond in any variety of customer scenarios. So maybe you have a chatbot responding to customers, and if a customer's not very happy, maybe you want your chatbot to be able to react, maybe not in an angry voice, but sort of the opposite. If a customer gets upset at something, obviously be a good listener and try to figure out what they're really asking for and react accordingly.
So would you recommend actually putting this in like a business line of app, like where, it just responds with "I am Groot" to everyone, like for actual enterprise development, or?
It depends on how many users are using it. You do not want to get the same reaction from your users, of course.
That's funny.
So you must be doing some sort of sentiment analysis here. Is that what's going on?
Yes.
What I'm seeing here looks a lot like a discussion with my kids, where eventually it ends in all caps and shouting.
Yep. So let's take a look at the contributors down here. As you can see, I created the repo, and then we have some contributions from Dave and David. So just to be clear, I do invite anyone to contribute. Your name does not have to be Dave or David. So if I go ahead and click on commits, you'll see that some of these updates over here, where, let me click on that. And so not that one, sorry. Forget which one it updated to. Update with customized embedded, but let's click on that one.
Made me do this.
So there's some activities going on over here, where is initially it was just Groot responding with I am Groot or I am Groot. And let's go up the chain over here and let's look up the next one, key vault integration. So this is where I'm pulling out, or rather the code is pulling out the keys that you would normally not embed in your code itself, and so that it's also included inside the key vault. And let me go up to here and go to, okay, it is in the other branch. So let me go to the other branches as well. And that's where it was merged in.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice the commit message that Myra was laughing at there from our good friend Dave Brock. Shahed made me do this.
That's awesome. So I guess how prevalent is the usage of these chatbots? Like, are you seeing them being used more and more? And how does our framework compare to other frameworks that are out there? Was it pretty easy to deploy this? And, how long does it take to do something like this?
Yeah, so the deployment time, it's as simple as just deploying your chatbot to Azure. And the deployment tutorial that you had discussed earlier lets you use both the CLI and also the user interface from Visual Studio as well. So you have multiple ways of doing this. You could go ahead and set up your chatbot on Visual Studio or VS Code and then deploy it using the CLI. You could go to the Azure portal and make sure you create the necessary app service or bot service for your app, and then deploy it through. And I know a lot of people, they frown upon things like right-click publish. That is one way to get started. Obviously, you do not want to do that in a real-life setting. You need continuous integration. But Visual Studio continues to support a quick deployment feature of right-click publishing as well.
That's awesome. So I guess another follow-up question would be, so if you have, like, I noticed the website is hosted like Azure websites, and it's got like this little user interface for it there.
Yep.
But what if I wanted to embed that little chat window in my, my business application? How would I do that? Are you familiar with how to do that, or?
Yes. So Bot Framework supports the concept of channels. The web chat is just one of the many channels that you can support. So whether you want to support text messaging directly from your bot, so someone can use any phone, they don't need any special apps, you can do that. There's a direct line channel as well. You can embed the bot, as we saw, within a web app or within your application as well. So Bot Framework does have a variety of channels from third-party apps. So let's say you'd like to embed Facebook Messenger activities. So you have a Facebook page, you want to link that with your Facebook developer account. Maybe you'd like to have your custom app maybe a mobile app that's running on your phone, you can set that up with your bot framework channels as well.
Awesome. Cool.
And I suppose it's also easy to integrate with other services. Let's say that if you have like a library of documents or something and people are searching for content, that you could integrate the bot with like with search services or like other Azure services available.
Yes, so the backend code, it can dig into any database or any backend API that you wish. So instead of just responding back, in this case with sentiment analysis, it can respond back with digging into any database or getting any data, and also interacting with LUIS, which is an acronym that stands for Language Understanding Intelligence Service, I believe. And LUIS lets you have more customized reactions to what a user is trying to say. So because a user could try to talk to a bot using different types of language. So you can use LUIS to sort of determine what the person is trying to say and link that to an intent. And once you figure out what the user is trying to ask or trying to say, you can have a variety of questions and statements that can filter down to the same answer. So whether someone says, what time is the movie starting? Or what time does this movie start? You can follow up with additional questions by integrating bot framework with Microsoft's LUIS as well.
So question for you, Shahed, would be, as someone who's never created a bot, I mean, no, not me, I'm asking for a friend, but let's say I haven't created a bot. How steep is that learning curve? What are some critical skills that would be needed to successfully create a bot?
So there are a couple of different languages that it supports. As this is a .NET show, I'm also partial to C#. So I know that .NET and C# is supported for bot framework. A lot of folks might prefer JavaScript. So let's say whether you're a front-end or back-end developer, you have JavaScript experience. Or if you have experience in other C-based languages, you can jump into other JavaScript or C#. Those are the ones that I do recommend primarily. Bot framework does have a growing library of languages that it supports. I'm not personally experienced in those other languages, but I always recommend starting with at least C# or JavaScript, especially because the documentation is there to get you started very quickly.
Cool. So now that you've shared that, another question I had in mind for you is, what inspired you to create this GRUUT bot? Were you trying to learn a new piece of technology, or were you just bored on a Saturday, or
yes,
were you looking to build a proof of concept for a customer?
I would say just sort of all of the above, because a lot of the time folks are trying to just get started with, hey, this new version of bot framework just came out, or Azure just updated their app service, or new features available. How do I get started? And there are a lot of tutorials available to go deeper into a variety of things, but just a proof of concept to get started. I wanted to get that out there, and also some silly discussions I was having online where I had suggested maybe someone should create a GRUUT chatbot that just says, I am GRUUT. So that's what led to creating this. And then I think what made it useful was to get the Dave's feedback and updates to get the sentiment analysis in there. Because that makes it a little more powerful, right? It's able to react to the chatbot itself and what people are saying, how people are saying it, and figure out whether someone's happy, sad, and so on.
And then some of the actual personality of, GRUUT actually shines through. I think that was pretty awesome as well. So we actually had a question here. Luis says, for the web chat client, have you considered using something like Blazor WebAssembly?
Not at this time. I do have some other stuff like NetLearner, the project I'm going to show shortly, where I will demonstrate some Blazor capability as well.
Awesome.
Another less serious question was, how does someone get as smart as all of you? And that comes from our friend Chris. That was followed up with an answer of eat your veggies. Yes, there is some truth in that. And I point out specifically carrots. They do the body good.
I was going to say I didn't eat much veggies when I was growing up, but carrots was one thing I ate. So.
Well, I'm not smart, so there's that.
There you go. So GRUUT says, I am GRUUT.
I am GRUUT.
Okay, so there's 3 variations from what I'm seeing in how GRUUT will respond. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So let me know when you'd like to move on to deeper and meatier things, and we can also proceed as well.
I'm gonna throw the GRUUT chatbot web UI link here so that people can go play with this while we're continuing the show. But you can go to the next thing here, and I'll type it in.
Sure. And then also the link to the GRUUT chatbot itself is, or the code itself is under my GitHub repository, Shahed C/GRUUT chatbot.
Thank you for sharing that. So as Shahed mentioned, that is open source. If you saw something there you'd like to hack on, go ahead and do that. Submit a pull request. Have some fun.
All right, so I have a couple of slides here, just some visuals to guide us through some of the conversations here. This isn't meant to be a slide-heavy discussion. It's more meant to be a discussion between those of us who are on the call, any questions that people might have. But I wanted to sort of go over things that I've been working on in the past year or so. It's been mostly focused on .NET Core 3.1, but as you know, .NET 5 just came out last month. As I had mentioned to some folks, I'm currently on paternity leave, so I'm working on some new material for .NET 5. Won't be out till January though, so that will be something that we'll get a sneak peek on. All right. So let me know when you're able to see the screen.
We can see it.
You're
All right,
good.
cool. So sort of a little bit of history on the things that I've been working on the past couple of years. I really wanted to get back to my roots of sort of giving back to the community, but also explaining .NET Core to both beginners and veterans alike. And I thought, why not work on a series where people can come back to my blog, which is wakeupandcode.com. And initially I started in late 2018, focusing on .NET Core 2.1, 2.2. And as you can see, because of the .NET release cycle, I've had in the bold areas on the bulleted list, you can see that that's a mix and match of different .NET Core versions. But what really changed in the past year was that I was able to do everything in .NET Core 3.1 and also build a single product. So instead of having throwaway code samples, I built a tool called NetLearner. So the entire series is focused on building this one tool as we keep going. And the tool itself is something you can throw out on the web. It's just a simple link sharing app, but you can use it yourself to set up links to any learning resources you can think of, whether it's Pluralsight or YouTube or, of course, .NET documentation. So you can go back and forth and organize your learning links from all these different sources. And going forward, in 2021, I've decided to separate out my A to Z series and also the code that I'm building up. So the A to Z series will be a little more simplified, focusing on various C# topics. And obviously, there's more than 26 topics in C#, but I'll just hone in on 26 different topics, and then build up a cinematic visualizer app that I'll be building up over time. All right. Any questions, comments on that so far?
I just wanted to call out, I know you made a guest appearance on the ASP.NET community stand-up a while back, and you shared some details of your A to Z blogging series. For folks who are interested in learning more about that and sort of the history behind it, that would be a good place to start if you just go over to live.asp.net and then look for the episode with Shahed.
Yep, thanks for that.
Yep.
So one way to get started with a series is to keep pumping out regular features and regular content. So I had started out in October 2018, and as you can see, there's just a series of 12 blog articles that I'd done over 12 weeks. But the magic of this is I had revealed over time, from October to December, that this actually spells out a Happy New Year message. So during that time, I decided to reveal at the end of the year that I'm revealing there's different topics that are useful to someone learning ASP.NET Core and various topics in Azure as well, but also that there's a fun message hidden in there. There's not, again, something that I could pull off year after year. So I decided, well, why not just do something different in 2019, which is what led me to A to Z. So this time I slowly reveal each of the topics one by one. Sometimes people would respond back having suggestions on what I could do. But by the time I was done with the end of the series, I was able to publish not only 26 topics, but something you can literally read end to end. It would make sense in order as well. So at the very end, for example, you see W's for worker service, which originally was listed as one of the templates under ASP.NET. It's now under just the .NET templates. I used that to build a code sample where I was able to grab my blog content and automatically produce an ebook in a Word document format. So again, the sample for worker service is a very meta project where I was able to use that particular code sample to generate an ebook. So again, that was something I was able to produce for my readers. And towards the end, you'll see stuff like YAML-defined CI/CD for continuous integration, continuous deployment in Azure DevOps, and finally ending with zero downtime web apps, where once you've deployed, you want to make sure that you can continue to deploy to your site without having any downtime. So again, this was a 2019 series. But what really led to this ebook made me think that I wanted to really build up a single product. Once I was allowed to speak about all these projects on the .NET Community Stand-Up, as you can see this picture down here, I'll zoom in a little bit here. You can see the various folks here. You might see some familiar faces. There's John Galloway, who had been frequently talking about my content, but also invited me to speak. And you can see Scott Hanselman and Damian Edwards as well from the .NET teams.
That's a great picture of Damian Edwards. Like it's look like that moment in time. He almost looks like shocked, and I am too right now. Quite frankly, with the amount of content you've created, this is amazing.
Thank you. So again, not to be outdone, I wanted to really do something different in 2020. I thought, hey, let's just update the content for 3.1, but also I wanted to speak about it. And as you know, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it really exist, right? Does it really make a sound? So if I write some code and there's no one there to know about it, again, it's not very useful. So I made an appearance on one of our East Coast meetups based in Pennsylvania. It's called the Dev Talk Show. I spoke on their Twitch channel, and it's updated on their YouTube channel as well. And then this show over here today, I'm speaking with you all. What I wanted to do is really focus on this one NetLearner project. NetLearner itself is available on GitHub. So under Shahed C NetLearner app, as you can see here, it is deployed live on Azure under netlearner.org. But what's most interesting, I hope others will find interesting as well, is the way I've designed this project. Some of you may have noticed some of the various ways people are recommended to create ASP.NET Core apps. They're asked to share libraries or not share libraries, separate stuff out, their models and services, and so on. So what I started off with the clean architecture recommendations that we have seen from Microsoft and other developers as well, separating out the core and infrastructure stuff. But instead of having separate libraries for simplicity's sake, I've put them all under the same shared library. But most interesting here, and hopefully, again, others would find this interesting as well, is that I've repeated the same functionality in MVC, Razor Pages, and Blazor. Because a lot of the time, questions that I get from the community is, well, which one shall I use? Like Blazor is the latest and greatest thing, but the Razor Pages have been around for a while, MVC for longer. So I wanted to show that you can do the same thing in different languages or different types of web projects. And at the same time, it gave me experience to see how simple Blazor was. So one thing I noticed is when I built everything from scratch, I did some learning as I went. And again, everything's open source, so you can see how I built NetLearner over time. So by the time I built the MVC version, I built the Razor Pages version and the Blazor version, it was easier to update the Blazor version each time. And finally have an open-ended web API, which I didn't really build out. That was left as an exercise to be able to grab through any front end, let's say some JavaScript or any other way you'd like to grab that web API. Again, it's open source. People are free to try it out on their own. And then one thing you can see here is the UI looks slightly similar between the MVC and the Razor Pages, which is the first two screenshots you see here. The third one is the Blazor screenshot. Again, I started off with the file new project templates that Visual Studio comes with for ASP.NET Core, but you get the same functionality. And with that, I'm going to switch over to a browser window so you can see this in action. Any questions so far?
I was just going to say, while you're switching over, I want to say I'm glad that you're showing this off. One of the most common questions we get in the ASP.NET Core docs is, if I'm building web UI with ASP.NET Core, which application model do I use? Is it MVC? Is it Razor Pages? Is it Blazor? And if it's Blazor, which flavor of Blazor should I be using? Admittedly, that is a gap in the docs that we're working on addressing, but I see your project here is light years ahead of us in making that easier for customers to understand.
Yep, and I would like to put that the decision onto the customer. I know it's some people might feel like, well, I'd like a recommendation. So what I've done here is Here, as you can see, the blog series available on my site. I'll zoom in on this for those who are not aware. wakeupandcode.com should be hopefully easy to remember. And if I take a look at the deployed version, and I'll zoom in on this as well, netlearner.org. Again, this is just a portal site. This was built in Razor Pages itself. And I'm going to pull this window out and click on all those links. I'm clicking on the 3 links, MVC, Razor Pages, and Blazor. And I'm going to go ahead and accept the cookies and click on resource list. You can see I've already created some resource lists. I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. This is the Razor Pages version. Again, go to resource list after accepting cookies. And in case you're wondering, oh, well, how do I add cookies to my page? Because that's something that was added, or the cookie pop-up was added initially to the .NET Core templates for ASP.NET. Later on, it was removed. So I've included that in my C's for Cookies blog post on how to add that back. And finally, one for Blazor as well. So here I'm going to click on Resource List. And as you can see, here is a link that says Learn ASP.NET Core 3. I can click on that. And you'll notice that some of them just have links on them. Some of them have the word watch. So I detect which of them have MVC or YouTube links. Right now, it's just looking for a YouTube link on each of these. I click on it, and I can view the video directly. I can click on Close Pop-Up. Same for these. I can click on this and click on Watch, and then I can close the pop-up. Now, let's say I wanted to create a brand new list. Create New List. And then I want to say .NET Docs Links, and click Create. Now, this is creating this down here, but if I go to the Blazor version, and let's go to Resource List, and you'll notice that .NET Doc Links appears right away, and I didn't have to refresh that. I want to add a new resource, and let's say some link, and then I would say .NET, and I want to add it to .NET Doc Links. And I'll leave the feed URL empty. I had added that for things like RSS feeds. But if I go ahead and submit that right now, it's went ahead and updated my list, a list of resources. If I go back to Learning Resources, I'm going to hit refresh on this. This is the Razor Pages version. And you'll notice that some link is right there. And this link is over here as well. I can go directly to that link on the .NET website. And I'll show you how it works with YouTube videos. So let's say I have some videos over here. I'm going to hit pause in this video as it starts to play. And then if I go to add a new resource and then add that YouTube link and some video. And I don't remember off the top of my head whether it has to be, I have to remove some of these extra features on the side. So I'm just going to go remove that. You know, text parsing is something that you set it and forget it, and you don't always remember what you did. But there's some video link at the bottom, and it has a watch button right there, and I can watch that video I just added. And look, they're all celebrating too.
They are. That's perfect. That's perfect. This is where we cheer, right? Woo!
Yes.
Golf clap. I'm curious, Shahed, for the pop-up, is that a Bootstrap modal or something else? What are you using for
This is
that?
just a basic JavaScript that I was using. Again, a lot of the things, as many of us do as we search the internet, if something's been done before, look for how others have done it, or just ask around. And if I try to think about, wait, how do I create a JavaScript pop-up? So it was a simple search, web search, and also looking around on Twitter. And of course, as we know from any project, once you copy and paste some open source code, whether it's from Stack Overflow or GitHub, you put it in your own project and nothing works. So a little bit of tweaking after adding it. But yeah, it's just simple JavaScript to add that. And for Blazor, obviously, it's not JavaScript. It's just displaying a div that shows a video. And one thing I did find out very quickly, so as you'll notice some of these videos from Tim Corey, this is MVC Intro by Tim Corey, some of his videos are weren't embeddable. So I remember when I tried to click watch, and I don't remember if this is one of those or not. This one says video unavailable. So YouTube has an automatic block on embeddable videos. So again, something like that, if I want to watch it, I can just click the link directly and then go to Tim Corey's channel. So I asked Tim about it, and he said, did you want me to remove that block? And I said, actually, don't worry about it. This is actually a good demonstration of that feature if a video is allowed. So if I watch this other video, Razor Pages, I can hit play on it, and it starts to play right away. And again, if you choose to block it, the creator of the video can choose to make it embeddable or not. But yeah, what it allows you to do is whether you have a plural set video or a documentation link, you can stick it in here. I know a lot of .NET web apps have to-do lists. If you want to create a to-do list out of this, add another column for completed or not. So once you've completed a curriculum, you can just check it off if you want. That way you can keep track of what you're learning along the way as well.
And what were your experiences like doing all three flavors? Like, did you note any like performance differences or anything that came to mind while you were doing the three like different versions?
So performance-wise, I didn't notice any negative performance. One thing I noticed that did affect my time to develop was the trial and error for each of those. Right, if I was trying something new that hadn't been done before, or something that I learned somewhere but didn't really needed some tweaking, I found that I had some difficulties getting it to work. Some of it was the pop-ups that I was trying to implement in Blazor, or even something as simple as implementing those cookies back into MVC and Razor pages. I realized that in Blazor at the time that there was an easy way to add back those cookies, the cookie pop-up that we had initially. So those were things that I learned along the way. But again, the community is a great set of people out there where when you ask someone on Twitter or elsewhere, you're able to get some responses right away to help with some of that along the way.
Yeah, I think one benefit there, if you're looking at those three approaches that Myra was asking about, the common element across those three is the Razor syntax.
Yep.
If you're familiar with that Razor syntax, you should feel at home using any of those three. Did you find that to be true?
I did, yes. I think it's one of those things where if you've worked with ASP long enough, and I mean classic ASP with active server pages, you might recognize some of these yellow areas and think, hey, is this a classic ASP again? And you realize, no, it's very different. Like over the years, ASP has gone from the old classic ASP getting very, becoming all sorts of spaghetti code to become ASP.NET web forms, getting very heavy with view state and everything else that comes with that baggage, to MVC, which is super light and very easy to test, to what we have today. So I feel like I still like teaching things in MVC, whether it's like educating others on how to do MVC. I feel like the areas that we have here, I'm going to zoom in over here, that where you have the controllers, models, and views, easy to explain. And at the same time, with Razor pages, if you're just starting off directly from Razor pages, I feel that it's just easier to get directly into it without relearning too much about MVC. So if you're just starting clean and you want a lot of files and folders to spell everything out for you, I would recommend still starting with MVC if possible. If you want to just get started quickly and not worry about all the ceremony, Razor pages makes it easy to have a cleaner layout. So if I'm going to my learning resources index page, I see the Razor syntax here. I can see the code behind with the C#, where everything is using this shared resource. And when I go back to the Blazor page, and again, it's very different here, right? I look at the page, and suddenly the learning resources looks very different, right? You see these loading areas that with the way the table is set up. But again, the common Razor syntax, right? It's something that you're able to reuse. And speaking of reuse, I was going to also sort of talk a little bit about the shared lib, but again, open it up for any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I was just going to expand a little bit more on the Razor pages conversation there. So I think you nailed it, Shahed, with the explanation you provided. But little known fact is that Razor pages is actually built on top of MVC.
Yep.
David Fowler, the architect for ASP.NET Core, actually recently did an internal talk that he shared externally later on, where there's a really nice diagram in that slide deck that shows, sure enough, Razor pages is built on top of MVC. It also shows all of the other application models that exist in ASP.NET Core and how they fit into that overall architecture. The other thing I was going to say is that, a common question is, well, why Razor pages? If it's built on top of MVC, why do I need it? One of the reasons it was developed is to appeal to that net new audience of developers. If you don't already have a significant investment in the model view controller architecture, that might be, some unjustified ceremony for you. Just the fact that you would need to create a model, a controller, and a view file for every page you want to add to your application Whereas with Razor Pages, it's essentially one file, one Razor file with what I would call, I guess if you haven't used it, I would call it a code behind, but it's not really a code behind. It's called a page model.
Yep.
I hesitate to call it code behind because that gives old web forms developers nightmares, including myself.
Old habits die hard.
Yeah.
I still call it code behind too. And I actually
I-
thought about that when you were showing. Go ahead, Myra.
No, I was gonna say I do too. No.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's the code behind the markup, right? And the binding.
And if you didn't start from that era, then you would not know, you would not have those memories, hopefully. But yeah, the word page model is right there as the base class. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of clue as to where it's coming from.
So you can really think of, if you go from MVC to Razor Pages, you simplify things a bit. There's, as Shahed put it very well, there's less ceremony. You go to a CSHTML file and then a CSHTML.cs file, which is that page model file I was referring to.
Yep.
And I see, I got my answer here. I was going to ask this. I was kind of waiting for the right time. But for the Blazor app, to be sure, we are using Blazor server side, not the WebAssembly alternative. So you actually have an opportunity to where you could have the other flavor of Blazor here as well on this NetLearner platform and kind of show them, here's another alternative where you would have, it's still the Razor syntax though, right? And you could,
Yep.
So that's neat.
So on that note, I did want to bring up these 3 startup pages here as while we were talking. So as you can see, this over here is my MVC version, right? And it has add controls with views and add Razor pages and so on. But you might think, wait, why do I have add Razor pages here? And then if I go back to the Razor pages version, it's super simplified. Now what's going on here? If I go back to Blazor version, and I still see some of this, add Razor pages and also add server-side Blazor. So I wanted to address one thing here. A lot of people, when they wonder where should they start, and I advise them, if they want all the ceremony, if they want things spelled out for them, again, start with MVC. If you want it simplified, you can go with Razor pages, been around for a long time. And if you want to explore with Blazor, I would highly recommend jumping in on Blazor to try things out, see if it's right for you and for your team. It has stabilized a lot over the different releases and is very solid right now in .NET 5. But wanted to point out the obvious is that you don't have to get stuck with something, right? If you're starting with MVC and you want to add some Razor pages in there, and part of your application needs to have something different, it's not, you don't have to start down one path and get stuck there. No, you are able to mix and match. And if you do start with Blazor, it's just cleaner to have like all things Blazor, because the whole point of Blazor is to go down this new path and not get bogged down with like older ways of doing ASP.NET Core. And again, that's my 2 cents on how to get started and how to proceed with that.
Yeah, I think that's an important point because, as developer teams evolve and onboard new resources, they might find that, okay, this MVC approach is just no longer what we want to do.
Exactly.
From this point forward, we want to start using Razor pages. Good news is, as you pointed out, you don't have to rewrite your MVC stuff to use Razor pages. Those two can happily coexist in the same project. At the end of the day, they're all using the same ASP.NET Core routing system.
Yeah, I had a horror story. Before joining Microsoft, there was a project that I was involved with that basically had web forms, ASP web forms, and then they had part of it also serving up MVC. And then they were starting to upgrade to Razor pages, all in the same shooting match. And then they're like, well, to get the dynamic aspect of it, we're going to inject Vue.js as well. So it was a catastrophe of fun. And now I work at Microsoft, so I don't have to deal with that. No. There was a question I wanted to make sure we got to, and that's why I left it up there for a bit. They were asking, does Blazor use Kestrel? So this is talking about the web server.
So on the server side, if it's like I guess ASP.NET hosted, you can use Kestrel, but client WebAssembly Blazor does not. In fact, there's this new static web pages service in Azure where you can host WebAssembly Blazor, the client side stuff on that entirely. If that answers the question.
I believe it does. Awesome.
All right. And I wanted to address that as well about server-side Blazor versus client-side. So when I talked about the different versions that of ASP.NET I had to deal with doing the blog content over the years, I did say that I had the flexibility of doing 3.1 only this year, but WebAssembly Blazor wasn't ready when I started my series earlier this year. So I decided to not use the preview bits, and I went with server-side Blazor only. But going forward, which you'll see before the end of the show, I will be talking about the .NET 5 stuff, where I'll be covering some more Blazor as well. And I'm not sure exactly what mix and match I'll be doing, but it'll be a bit of a surprise.
There was a question in the chat. No, I'm not racing a motorcycle. I will dispel that confusion right now.
Maybe it was Shahed. Someone had
It wasn't here.
No, it wasn't here either. There's no motorbikes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a motorbike either.
There was a question about Kestrel and whether Blazor uses that or not. I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat that talks all about the different hosting scenarios for Blazor applications, and hopefully that will be of use to others in the audience as well.
All right, thanks for that.
Awesome. And we've got another question here right away. The individual's asking, can we consume gRPC service in a standalone Blazor?
So I haven't personally explored with gRPC. Is that something one of you would like to take?
I'm just going to jump right on there and say I believe so. I mean, gRPC is basically just it's Google's is that remote protocol procedure basically. So it's as an alternative to, like, someone help me here. Scott, do you know?
Yeah, so gRPC, it's a Google thing. Microsoft jumped on it to make it work with .NET. James Newton King, the creator of Newtonsoft.json, is actually spearheading that initiative on the ASP.NET Core team. And again, I'm saying this for folks who haven't heard of gRPC. So it's serializing using binary with the protocol buffers language from Google, or shortened as protobuf. We do have a doc somewhere here that addresses that specific question.
I just posted it in chat.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And again, I think that may have... Okay, so that's the gRPC overview doc. We do have a Blazor doc that shows how to use that with gRPC. I will dig that one up as well and paste that in the chat. Yes, it is possible. I haven't personally done it. David, I was actually thinking back to some issues you ran into last year for DevReach and your demos. You ran into something with, was it Blazor server calling? Well, that was SignalR service. Okay.
Yeah. There was a weird issue there with SignalR where the Blazor server-side version actually opens up its own SignalR channel. So when you try to use SignalR in addition to it for other things, it was actually a singleton service. So there was no way to actually do that. There was problems and it didn't work. So there was some weird hacky workarounds temporarily. But yeah, that was identified as a serious kind of bug.
Yep. So while we're on the topic of gRPC, one issue you will run into right now is, how do you easily host a gRPC service? There's actually another, I guess I would call it, variation of gRPC out there called gRPC-web that allows you to host such a service in IIS. With gRPC proper, it isn't currently possible to host that in just straight up IIS. And there were some Windows kernel changes that were required to make that work, followed by IIS changes, followed by changes in the actual ASP.NET Core framework. So there's some work to be done there. In the meantime, gRPC web is what you would want to use to test from the browser and host in something like IIS using it on Windows. Here is a doc.
I pasted the other one in there. There was a tutorial that I found. So I pasted 2 links.
You are okay. Yep. So this latest doc, gRPC/browser, that's what you'll see in the URL there, talks all about what I just described using gRPC web. A couple of months ago or so, this was actually an experimental project. It is now generally available and supported by the team.
And for folks that are in the .NET framework role, the gRPC is kind of like our replacement solution for WCF, was it?
Yeah, good point. So Myra, actually, I think you worked with Mark Rendell on that ebook.
Yeah.
So yes, as some folks are already aware, WCF isn't fully supported in what was previously .NET Core or what is now .NET 5. One piece of it is, one piece is not supported, and I forget if it's client or server. I want to say server WCF is supported in .NET Core, client is not. The migration path forward for such customers is, if you want to take that WCF service in .NET Framework land, import that to use the latest and greatest in .NET, the cross-platform variant, .NET Core, .NET 5. The recommended path is port that to gRPC. As I mentioned, we do have an ebook in the .NET Architecture Center that shows what your path forward is and how you get there. Mark Rendell, who is an MVP in our community, actually produced this ebook and developed a tool that will help you port WCF service to gRPC.
Yeah, I actually, the team had reached out to me because I had to update the What's New in .NET 5 article, where they specifically call attention to WCF and the implementation. So to confirm what you were saying before, the server side bits are there, and they got several NuGet packages that are officially supported for .NET 5 from Microsoft. And then it says that there's community stuff for the client libraries, which is all covered right here.
Yep. And, they're two different worlds, to be honest. I don't want to sidetrack the conversation here too much, but, think of WCF as a SOAP-based service, or you could have even made a WCF service RESTful, in which case it was wearing a costume it shouldn't have been wearing. gRPC, on the other hand, is not a SOAP-based technology. It's, it's using protobuf, it's binary-based, therefore much more performant when compared to WCF.
And as another lofty, high-level segue, potentially, there's another question here in chat. This one's saying, why should I use Visual Studio over Visual Studio Code?
Well, why don't we get Shahid's opinion on that? Because I know when we kicked off the show, he actually had both open.
Yeah.
All right.
So
let me know if you can see my VS Code screen.
Yep, we can see it. So what's your opinion there?
So my opinion is use what works best for you. So if you wanted to load everything from Visual Studio Code, like right now I have this open, the MVC project open. I can type in .NET Run. There is one difference here. Visual Studio does hold your hand in some ways where you need a developer certificate on your machine that if you don't have it on your machine, you try to load HTTPS, it'll tell you that your site is not safe. If you do it in VS Code, but Visual Studio sets it up for you. For VS Code, you do have to run one command one time. It'll give you the command. It's a def cert command that you can run in the command line, and you're able to get the cert set up right away. I've done that ahead of time. I just clicked on this link down here from the terminal. This is running completely from VS Code in my local host on this port, and it's the exact same site. I can click on the list. This is the local version of it, not the one that I deployed. Again, it's the new list that I can start creating over here, and it asks me to log in. So I won't go ahead and proceed with this right now, but it just goes to show you VS Code does the exact same thing. And if you're curious to see what that line is, and .NET Dev Cert, here's what the line is right now, .NET Dev Cert HTTPS -- trust, and that lets you do the one-time setup for your Dev Cert. I do like personally using VS Code, but Visual Studio. But if you want to use VS Code, you can do the exact same code in this setting as well. You could do everything that you want to for this project.
Yeah, I think it's really that's a very compelling statement. With the .NET CLI coming on board and like the SDK evolving with .NET Core and all that, it's become such a better, not necessarily a better option, but like such a possible thing where we're seeing .NET developers really embracing .NET Code, which, as you know, is entirely free and open source, which is really compelling.
So one of the benefits I've seen out in the wild, so prior to joining Microsoft, we would use VS Code as opposed to Visual Studio proper when we wanted a development team to use the same set of tools, no matter what platform they're developing on. So we had contractors who would join the team and they refused to use Windows, they'd be using Mac OS, and that was fine. And the reason that was fine is because VS Code provides a consistent development experience no matter which platform you're using, Windows, Mac, or Linux. that to me is one of the biggest deciding factors, I guess I would say.
Yep.
With Visual Studio proper, you're tied to Windows.
Well, they do have VS for Mac, but yeah, to your point, it
Yep.
is not as cross-platform. And there are, it's one of those things, kind of like to Shahed's point before, like, what is your development team comfortable with? What do they want to embrace? And I think it's entirely possible to use VS Code now, whereas years ago it wasn't.
Yep, I do want to highlight one thing here. You see a .vs Code folder here, has a slant.json. Initially, if you try to debug from here, it'll tell you there's something's missing. You would have to add a configuration. Again, this is something that you'll have to do one time. You might have to tweak it later on. I have this set up to launch my web app from here. Also, all the GitHub integration is right here as well. If you pull the code from GitHub, you can do all your changes from here. So again, VS Code is fully functional. As some people like to say code editor, not calling it an IDE, but again, people who are using it as their day in, day out IDE, you can call it whatever you want, as long as it works for you.
Absolutely. I think the other interesting thing is that, Visual Studio, it really holds your hand a lot more than VS Code. VS Code, it's almost like you have to know a bit more, and you get closer, I guess, with the SDK and some of those commands, and they're just more highlighted and prevalent. Whereas the proper VS Code or VS IDE kind of abstracts some of that away from you.
Yep, and also I do like the whole solution project based format here. Some people don't like it, but let's say right now I'm looking at solutions, and I wanted to talk about this shared library that I hinted at earlier. Let me go ahead and minimize that one. And I'm going to zoom in on this shortly. The shared library here takes care of the DB context for your web project. And as you know, if you click File New Project, everything ends up in one project. You may be wondering, well, if I just want to use the shared library for all these different web projects, how do I get started? So what I'd initially done, if I go back to my series, so here's my blog series A to Z, but just before that, I had a prelude series that talks about code sharing between different web projects, and then sort of like a hello world just to get started with 3.1, and just to talk about NetLearner, which I end up building over A to Z. So I'm going to click on that first link there, maybe zoom in a little bit. Talks about creating that shared library and then using the shared library in different web projects and then running the samples. So again, you can start at wakeupandcode.com. At the very top of the menu, the ASP.NET Core link will take you to the index page of all the different blog posts that I have over time. So hopefully that'll help you make decisions for your own project, but also looking into the future, right? I did want to talk about what's next. So I know we have a couple of minutes left.
There was a question here real quick. We want to make sure we get to this before you move on. I think, Myra, did you throw that one up?
Yeah, it was when he was showing about VS Code, the JSON templates. So student T is asking if it's included in the Omnichar extension.
I forget where I got it from. I know that I had to create it the first time, like when I created a new project, whether it's .NET New or opening a project that you're already creating Visual Studio. It wasn't already added. VS Code prompted me to add these in, and I just said yes, and you can also click Add Configuration here to add it. I don't recall off the top of my head if it came with that OmniSharp extension, because I already had the extension installed.
Yeah, it does not. The launch JSON is kind of global to VS Code, and it's for different things. Like I do a bunch of TypeScript development, and you get the same thing for like Node.js.
All right, good to know. Yeah, it's one of those things when you have everything installed. It's I know when I had older version of Visual Studio, I used to have Refactor installed or ReSharper installed, and I would forget what features came with it versus with Visual Studio, and I haven't had that installed for a while now.
Yeah, but let's see what you have planned for the future. And
All
Kim
right.
is saying congratulations on your new edition, and we're all
Oh, thank you.
happy for you.
Oh yes, congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, 2020 has been a very strange year. Let me put it that way. So one of the things I wanted to do is make sure I can still keep up with my content and my day job. As I mentioned, I'm paternity leave right now, but also wanted to continue giving back to the community, while raising a newborn with my wife at home. So I figured, well, what if I made it easier for myself to create a sustainable pace of new content? So with the .NET 5 release and coming up with different C# topics, I do have a bunch of topics in my head right now. I'll be revealing that over time starting January. to include C# features, C# 9 features, but also not just C# 9, because sometimes you have some earlier features that were maybe released in C# 7 and 8 might be interesting to someone going forward. Obviously, all those features are available under the .NET 5 runtime as well. So we'll focus on different topics. Again, not comprehensive because C# is larger than just 26 topics. But at the same time, also build a new product. So here I have this Tony Stark GIF of his 3D visualized feature set where he's interacting with his computer a certain way. And the reason I use this is because I wanted to create a sort of virtual app to be the maybe the highlight or the showcase of showing one segment of the app I'm building, but also to be able to utilize the Microsoft or the Marvel cinematic universe as a demo. So here you see this app here called Cinematic Visualizer app. It has a lot of components to it. So let's focus all the way down at the bottom here where it says Web App Service. So at a basic minimum, I would start creating a web app where you can find all sorts of cinematic universe trivia, starting with the Marvel universe. Maybe you're wondering how many movies did Captain America have? When did Tony Stark first meet Captain America? Oh, I know that there's a new show called WandaVision coming out on Disney Plus next month. What do I need to watch in order to watch it? I've heard this movie called Black Widow that's been delayed several months. If it does come out next year, what do I need to know to be able to get into it? Which characters is it about? I thought this character no longer exists. You have so many questions. So the whole purpose of having this suite of apps is to be able to be a fun trivia app, but also be able to answer questions. So you see how everything goes to a common database. Maybe use the bot service to be able to field some of those questions and answers for the end user. Use the web app service to be able to have the main interface, which I can do my data entry, but also to have the end user consuming all that information, and maybe some pie in the sky end goal of having HoloLens 1 and 2 support, where you can visualize all these things openly in a 3D environment as well. On the right side here, you see I also have some Azure functions as well. There's only so much data I can put in that might become stale into my application. So also the ability to use external APIs to periodically or on demand pull in data into my database. Azure Functions is a great way to do that. I do have a question mark at the very bottom, Cosmos DB question mark. Dabbled a little bit with Cosmos DB, but I've been mostly using SQL Server for a lot of my ASP.NET projects. So again, that's something I would consider as well.
Ooh, we should work together on that.
All right.
I advocate for Cosmos. Yes, that should be Cosmos DB exclamation mark.
Exclamation mark. All right. And well, you know what? We can do that right now, right? I remember
Nice.
it was a while back. I was in a meeting with some folks at some company we're consulting at before Microsoft, and we're in a meeting, and the question was, "Hey, we should do this thing," and someone said, "Yeah, let's just take care of it right now." Everyone just stared at my colleague, right? What are you saying? You mean we can just take care of it right now? We'll be done before we even leave the meeting. So, yeah, I love making changes, on the fly here.
Awesome.
All right. So with that, I wanted to show this architecture before we wrap up here. So here you can see I've slightly differently colored the MVC eraser pages in Blazor, and also repurpose each of them to be slightly different. You might choose to use MVC eraser pages or Blazor, or depending on the type of app you're building. So again, either one of these could be any one of these technologies, but I decided MVC, having all the controllers, views, and models separate, very quickly be able to scaffold pages and create data entry screens would be a great use of MVC, where I'm entering all my movie data. The main portal side could be Razor Pages, where it's very easy to pull up a page very quickly to be able to grab backend data displayed on the screen. But the highly interactive portion, whether it's like a movie trivia portion of this app, or the part that most users will be interacting with, and also because Blazor's the new exciting thing, wanted to do that part in Blazor. So I'm not sure exactly what order I'll be doing these in. Hopefully the data entry first, because I need to get something in there. But again, I'll be building that over time as well. All right.
Awesome. Yeah, we got about a minute left. So are there any closing thoughts? Anything? I mean, you just covered so much stuff. First of all, I just want to congratulate you on your newborn, but also like a successful blogging career. That's like a full-time job in it of itself. So just my hat goes off to you. I'm not that consistent.
Yes. Thank you for that. But also in closing, I wanted to leave you with this thought. Think about .NET 5 going forward, what you can do with it. But also, I hope you'll look forward to the different topics I'll be coming up with, and maybe provide some feedback along the way as well. My user handle on Twitter is @ShahidC. It's my first name and last initial. And my blog again is wakeupandcode.com.
Awesome. This has been great. Thank you
Thank you
so
all.
much.
It was great. See you guys next week. We have Andres coming up talking about Xamarin. So stay tuned.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.